Welcome to our lunch break. And I'm Lydia Stomina, and today with us, as always, are Jennifer Tanguay, Candy Sheehan, and I'm looking at the screen in the order, Karen Gibson. Thank you so much. We welcome you, and we hope you come back to us every week. So today, I invite you to think about some interesting phenomena. Denialism is something when we hear the news, and it is given to us as absolutely proven fact, but we deny it. And if you think about recent events with COVID, that was a perfect illustration how the majority, the largest segment of American society rejected this whole idea, first of all, of some kind of a virus that can kill so many people. And many people still struggle. Even though we look at this millions of deaths and hear the news, the brain does not take it. And then, of course, if you think about such a phenomenon as racism, many people just shrug their shoulders and say, what racism are you talking about? We don't have racism. And then we hear shooting in like Minneapolis and recent shooting now. So when police officers kill black young people, and that's what triggered police to use the weapon. And I want to talk about this interesting response on our human side to facts that ideally can resonate to our reason. Because, you know, God created us as intellectual people. And I don't think anybody will argue with that we are people with intellect, we are people with education. And of course, the whole civilization, history of civilization proves that. Humans can explain everything that goes around us using our reason and using history and using knowledge and science. But of course, we know how many arguments and controversies we hear still about genetically engineered food. So people argue about vaccination of children. And of course, that comes back to where we started with vaccinating against COVID. So it's just interesting. And the reason it made me think about denialism is what I see is going on in my country, former country, Russia. When the majority of Russians deny the fact that it is war, there are millions, over 10 million people left Ukraine. And when I talk to my classmates, their facts are that, Ukrainians just simply made buses available and forcefully put their population into buses and on the trains and sent them out. And so everything I try to bring as a fact. My friends, former friends, I would say, they argue that if you turn it all 100 degrees around, then that's a fact. And that's what I thought we will talk about, denialism. And it's a wonderful book that I will bring it closer to the screen, written by Michael Specter. He talks about this interesting phenomenon of denialism that applies to many areas of life. And of course, even the most educated people who are reasonable on many other levels. But somehow, when it comes maybe to their life experience, like, for example, when one of the women, he gives an example, fluent, very well educated, and she passionately stand against medication and against pharmaceutical companies' researches, because she says it's all evil, it's Satan, and we don't need medication. Vitamins is the best of a tactic to treat any disease. And then of course she shared that that led her daughter not to vaccinate the children. So you see, this is how in the families this belief continues. What stands behind? Why people are so prone to denialism, to self-deception? Because if you think about grief, one of the stages of grieving is denial. Right? So we deny when it is too painful to face the truth. We deny scientific information, and the ability of our human mind, human brain, is absolutely stunning. Because what we do as people, we connect facts that are absolutely not even possible to connect. But somehow we rationalize that, and we come up with our own theories. That this is what happened. So, for example, with COVID, we could say that I never wore a mask and I did not die, so there is no COVID, right? Or I avoided vaccination. My aunt got vaccinated and she got all these health complications. She nearly died. So, and then people, when they develop this belief system, so then imagine yourself, you step into a conversation with a person who is passionately believe it. It's a passion. You see, it's all about our ability as humans to take a stand on the side of something that makes our sensory so excited, you know? Because COVID does not excite people. It scares people. War in Ukraine does not excite people. It scares people. So that's how people create their own kind of false stories. And if you stand up and in the midst of the conversation, you bring your own rational explanation of COVID or war or history of Ukraine, people attack you because it does not match their belief system that they developed. And that's where this passion and anger and insults come up. And it's so draining. I know that I need to talk more about Ukraine and Russia, but every time I try to develop at least some system. What people place on social media, if I even repeat that, you would fire me in an hour, maybe even in 5 minutes, because I don't even know the words that I read. I refuse to think Russian people who are raised reading Pushkin and Dostoevsky and Leo Tolstoy, people who have such a beautiful language, they suddenly fell into this kind of a swamp of cussing and using words that I did not really, again, I will repeat, I did not know they existed in our language. It's like I'm talking to foreigners now. But every social post now causes so much anger and hatred. And that's what made me look for this book, Denialism. Anything that contradicts those beliefs of people who believe that war in Ukraine is not war, but it is a special operation to finally kill and remove from the earth that is known as Nazism. And this is such a paradox, because on the territory of Ukraine, thousands and thousands of Jews were murdered and burned in those concentration camps. And the president of Ukraine is a Jew. And so, but you see, when people are so passionate about their own personal developed theories, then they cannot step down. It's like losing themselves. But again, remember when we started, the this denialism and the self-deception start with grieving. So when our brain cannot process too much pain, we just simply reject it. And then everything, any news, even if they were available in Russia, they will be denied, because people cannot process so much blood, and they cannot process and refuse and deny the fact that their own children or husbands who became soldiers are now murderers and even rapists. Again, if you say Russian soldiers rape women, and then they become so cynical, they said, what do you mean mass rapist? How could they even be physically performed? So you see, their mind goes into some absurd, instead of allowing themselves to take a moment and even think for a second what any person can do in a situation of war, when it is death and horror and the brutality every minute. So people lose their minds and they can be turned into animals. Jennifer has on her calendar, and I think it's important, that on the 28th of April, we will be celebrating, or acknowledging, I would rather say, the Day of Holocaust Remembrance. And I think it's closely connected to what is happening in Ukraine. Because again, people from many countries are so embarrassed. Like Germans are embarrassed of what happened in Germany and done by Germans against another group of people. And it happens in every country. And it happens in America. And that's what today, when I invited people to step away from the desk, I wanted to ask you, are you in self-deception? Are you denying the fact that you need to know and accept and respect that this whole centuries of civilization development led us to become people who need to use reason and intellect and scientific facts? But of course, from this point, I think I need to invite people also to think about what's going on in Ukraine. And if you ever see the signs, even in your workplace, of somebody who becomes kind of putting himself or herself above other people, and you are stepping into that and becoming a part of that system, stop it. Stop any cult that you have in your life. And it could be a cult of your loved one. It could be a cult even of your children. And that's what I think it's important to understand, that denialism is a dangerous side and very typical for us humans because it is caused by pain. So this is where I wanted to maybe pause for a while and hear what you think. And then I will say more about Putin and where is he with his self-denialism and how he practices self-deception, or what is this, his phenomenon. So, but let's hear what you say about denialism.
Pastor, I was thinking about a song Rodgers and Hammerstein had written for South Pacific. And I don't know the exact title of the song, but the sentiment of the song is, you have to be oh so carefully taught. And they were talking about the prejudices of people. We grow generations of prejudices because we are taught that. It's almost like the generations from the past want to perpetuate it into the future. And so each generation learns what they have been taught, and they cannot help but pass it on. Just because they have been taught this and they carry it on, and at some place throughout the generations, someone needs to just kind of put their hand up and say, stop. We don't want to be like that. Maybe in the past they were, but we don't want to do this anymore. We have to think in a different way. We have to pass on something that is better than what we've been taught. You wonder how families continue prejudices. They have not experienced the same things on their day-to-day life, but they have been carefully told and carefully taught how they ought to feel and how they ought to think, and they ought to be, simply because you are the family of us. The family of us needs to put their hand up and stop that, whether it is Russia, United States, whatever culture that we're up against with these prejudices. And that generation needs to think for themselves and view what is happening and how they are interacting with that.
Often our prejudice are so hard for us to see, and we don't recognize the fact that we have grown up believing something. And just even when you look at someone or you judge someone and you put them in a class or a category, it's often so automatic that I don't think we even know we're doing it. So I don't think any of us are free from guilt. We all have some guilt on a certain level. The thing that I'm most concerned about is people who can see or they have the ability to read the truth. They could do the research. They could know what the truth was and choose not to believe it. You know, someone told me, well, I just don't know what to believe. And my thought for them was, please do some research, do some reading, check into some credible sources, and then you'll have a pretty good idea of what the truth is. The thing that I'm seeing, though, some people don't believe anybody. They don't believe anything they hear except something that fits right along with what they want to believe or lines up with their own prejudice. And I think that's something that's really going to be difficult for us to deal with, getting people to realize, what is the truth, what is a reliable source, who can you trust.
Thank you, Candy. And this is exactly what's happening. So the author of this book, Denialism, he actually says that he himself, when he expected people like him to simply compare facts, read some latest researches, compare historic materials, but he says, I suddenly realized I was in denial. Just simply because I denied that truth that I see everywhere, that people are in denial. It's like a double denial. It's kind of funny. Willfully ignorant, he says, willfully ignorant. It's because of the hideousness of truth. A fact. That's the latest research. I've read about it in Harvard research. I've read about it in academic researches. But the truth is, people who passionately believe in their system, what they created safely, to ignore the pain, to stay away, to protect themselves from pain and truth and fear and anxiety, then whatever they read is not truth. For them, it's just another opinion. You see, and that's why I think go ahead.
I think that's so true, because the truth is so hard to comprehend or to even let yourself believe. I was watching an interview of an 85-year-old woman who had been raped in front of her disabled husband, and that was a horror too great for me to acknowledge. I didn't want to know that. I didn't want to see that. And she herself said, I wish they had killed me. She would rather have not lived through that. And I just thought how horrible it could be. You think you might hit an age where you're safe. An 85-year-old woman being raped. See, that's just pure evil. I just can't think of it as any other way, because she was very frail, she was very old, and it's amazing she did live through that. And to say you didn't believe her, look at that woman. This was something that was a horrific thing. You wouldn't be proud, you wouldn't want to tell that, but she was telling the truth. And if you refuse to believe that, then I don't know what we can do to make it right. I don't know. I don't want to believe that's true, but I know it was true.
And the fact, it's so tragic, because first of all, I'm so glad that she came up and did the truth. But the problem is that people who will hear her speak, some of them will even mock her, and they will say, oh, that's her fault. Or lots of anecdotes they will bring, and stories, and laugh, and this is what the tragedy is of our society, that we deny because we're afraid of pain. We deny the fact that what if somebody in my family did that? And of course our hearts and minds go toward defending our family member. I had a conversation with our church member last week about what is going on in our city. And I was shocked because, for example, she says it is just making me absolutely crazy to think like 80% of rapes of children who are raped take place in our rural society. So here in St. Joseph, around St. Joseph or Missouri, in our county, more rapes happened in rural families. And nobody talks about it. I had never thought of that. But there are lots of court hearings on that topic. But again, we don't hear anything in the newspapers because it's everything just like nobody wants to believe in that somebody from the family could do that. Or the fact that we have so many homeless people outside. We also, like, our eyes become so dull because we don't know what to do. And then it's easier just to say, well, that's their choice of life. But is it? So how can we find out? How can we provide help that is appreciated without making people feel even more like outcasts? Doing it for them, like, because we can do this. but not doing it with them to help them grow. Such a complex topic. And this denialism is also, again, coming back to Holocaust. Now, we deny rape of children, we deny murder in the family, just like what Mike Perry talked recently, that the stepson shot his stepfather just face to face, not hiding, not accidentally. And again, do we talk about this? What is happening in the families? And why do we stay in self-denial that there is so much tragedy here, right here? And every time it comes to election, I think people are ready to kind of kill each other over all these debates. And you see, this is what happened in Russia. This is when we deny the existence of Holocaust, we deny that over 20 million of people were killed and burned alive during the time of Nazism. And so then we start doubting even, maybe Russians are right, maybe they have a reason to attack Ukraine, to end this Nazism. But now as I promised, back to Putin. What kind of denialism does this man practice? What is in his head? What is in his brain? Is he intellectual? Is he a sick man, paranoid? And I know many people talk about, yeah, I think he is. But so there are so many different theories about what drives him. But first of all, when some people say, oh, greed, because the reason for any war is to gain something, right? So Russian economy is so poor. Russia does not produce some substantial goods, items that will be competitive on the world market. So, of course, we could say, yes, maybe gaining more territory, maybe gaining more people, maybe whatever it is. Russian people even say, well, we will go to war and men in other countries will get our women. So it's just like, it's absurd what they're talking about. But so the point is, when it comes to Putin, it's not greed. I listened to different commentators, and one of them is that the man who robbed his country and took, think about the number, $3 trillion of dollars, trillions. And he and about 1,000 of his surrounding, people who are loyal to him. But so they don't need anything. But now, of course, with the sanctions, they cannot get their money. And so that's what the new interpretation I've read, that this is just a little man, a pitiful man who is so scared for his life, who is afraid to die, because he's already 68, which is not old. But imagine if you have so much wealth and so much power, then of course it's inevitable that you start thinking about, oh, what will happen to me? People will poison me, people will kill me. And that's fear. And that's what I think make people like Putin to become so aggressive and cruel and brutal. What do you think about that?
I think you make a valid point in that he's a very small man and he's very fearful. And he felt like the worst thing that ever happened in Russia was when the Soviet Union dissolved. And that was always in his mind, that he could bring it back together and restore it to its former greatness as a world power. And so, and of course, he does have to always look over his shoulder and see who's coming, because I'm sure he fears for his life. It was so telling whenever you see him in his little conferences now, where he's sitting by himself and clear away from him as anyone that might be an advisor. He's getting no advice right now, I would guess. So many of his generals even have been killed in the war already that, he's got no one that would be willing to tell him the truth, because he can't handle the truth. He doesn't want to hear it. And so I just don't see how things can get better right now with him in the state of mind that he's in. I think he's one of the deniers himself. He doesn't really see fully what's happening, or the fact that the Ukrainians are not going to easily give up. I think he thought it was going to be a pretty easy march into Kyiv and to be able to take over the country. I think he thought Zelensky would flee the country and it'd be his. Well, it's just not working the way he had predicted, and so it's going to be a long, hard fight, I'm afraid. I hope it doesn't turn into another Syria. That would be really sad. So much would be destroyed, and much has already been destroyed.
Yeah.
I think that Putin is a victim of himself. He has told his story over and over and over so many times to his own ego that he really fully believes it. Followers of Putin are believing him because they're putting more faith in his word than looking at the facts. It is true that some people need leaders, and they will follow a leader regardless of some of the evil things they're doing because they are denying that the evil is actually happening. Because how could they look at the reality of that and stand to even be with themselves? And that's where you're talking about that denial, is it's too painful to believe that you are a part of something that is so evil because you have been duped and you have followed it for such a long time. So he is a victim of himself, of building himself up in his own mind to where he cannot believe another way. He would completely collapse and mentally be fragmented if he faced it. Unfortunately, he's going to have to face the judgment of God someday, and how painful that's going to be for the followers of Putin as well, who can't look at the reality of the evil going on.
Yeah. I think you got to take in consideration, too, with anybody who abuses power, rather it be in a case like Putin or an abusive case, or just with families in general. I think people learn to groom people. And sometimes they can make you completely believe that the sky is purple and the grass is blue. Whatever they say is the word, and that's the only truth that there is. And it's a good possibility that's what he's done over there, and that's Putin's grooming.
Yeah. And of course, thank you. This is very important what you said, all of you, because it helps us understand how our mentality and how, as a group of people, we act. Because we do not talk in this case about individual sin, but we talk about the institutional sin. And in this country, the whole country, in this world, we see how the whole country, Russia, is actually guilty of that institutional sin. And the only way to correct it is to have communal confession. This is what I think everybody who listens to us today. And if you have bullying, for example, in your workplace, and you prefer to be as a kind of in the role of a bystander. And there are, again, two reasons for that. First of all, it's too painful to see that somebody is attacked, and it's a sense of guilt also for not doing anything. But try to overcome it. Try to apply your reason. Try to use your heart and your mind and say enough. And stand up and speak up. And unfortunately, that's what we do not see happening in Russia. Because what I hear Candy and Karen and you, Jennifer, talked about is like so easy to confuse people, but then when ideology is pushing the same information, so people get extra food and fuel to their belief system that they develop, it makes them comfortable, safe. It's like, I'm safe here. But otherwise, how can you explain that this pitiful, lonely man is viewed by Russians as a strong, compassionate savior of the Mother Russia, that he is so modest, and he lives in a modest apartment, a small apartment in Moscow, that he wears this simple suits. And I thought, he's the richest man in the world. And of course, you know how I said in the beginning, the attacks just following. And I try not to read them every day, and sometimes just kind of skip. But one woman wrote, Lydia Istomina, when were you dismissed from the mental institution? And I ignored it. And this woman was so insistent that several days later she was checking that I don't post anything. And she says, Lydia Stomina, you did not answer my question. When did you get dismissed from the mental institution? So for them, you see, when it contradicts the concept of truth that people created, any opinion, even if it is based on history and science, that does not match, it's not a fact. It's another opinion. So I invite you to think about it today. Thank you for listening. But also, always address your heart to God in prayer. When it is confusing, when it is scary, just take a pause and meditate. And center yourself in God. And remember that God loved the world so much that He sent His only Son, Jesus, to the cross. Not to death, but to transform you personally and transform everybody and transform our humanity and make us all see the truth that sometimes we just refuse to see. I wish you a wonderful day, and I'm thankful to Karen and Jennifer and Candy for your input. Thank you so much. We will see you next. God bless you.